Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Donald Trump is at it again. You give him a stage and he repeats an old lie that he forced India and Pakistan to agree to a ceasefire. Only this time he's made it more dramatic. Trump now says that he threatened both sides with 350% tariffs. We'll break it down for you. Also tracking the markets. Stocks are in the green as Nvidia's strong forecast defies the fears of an AI bubble. A special report on how West Asia is becoming the new battleground for AI domination. Why are tech giants and governments racing for data power in the desert? And what's driving up Indian markets? Will Sensex cross 100,000 in 2026? We'll tell you about Morgan Stanley's bold prediction. What's the secret deal to end the war in Ukraine? Will Zelensky take it? Why have Gen Z protesters returned to the streets in Nepal? Will Donald Trump end the war in Sudan? Why have the Saudis asked him to intervene? A report on the church shooting in Nigeria, India's artisanal chocolate boom, and what is FOFO, the fear of finding out? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Israel launches fresh strikes on Gaza, killing at least 4 people. Mediator Qatar warns of an escalation. Doha says this threatens the fragile truce between Israel and Hamas. The ceasefire came into effect on the 10th of October. Since then, Israel has carried out repeated strikes on Gaza. Taiwan's president lunches on sushi in support of Japan amid its row with China. This comes after reports said that China will halt Japanese seafood imports. The row was triggered by Japan's new prime minister, who suggested that Tokyo could intervene militarily in any attack on Taiwan. China claims the self-ruled island as its own territory. Prime Minister Narendra Modi all set to attend the G20 summit in South Africa. He will leave for Johannesburg tomorrow. Prime Minister Modi is also expected to hold bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the summit. This is the 4th consecutive G20 summit that's being held in the global south. Donald Trump makes a U-turn on the Jeffrey Epstein files. He signs a bill ordering its release after initially opposing it. The files contain documents from an investigation into the sex offender. Trump has accused the Democrats of using the scandal to divert attention and undermine his accomplishments. And a Spanish court orders Meta to pay more than $500 million. The penalty has to be paid to local media outlets for unfair competition practices. The Facebook owner says it will lodge an appeal. The ruling is the latest in a series of fines that Meta has faced in Europe.
I told Scott, 350% tariff to settle that war.
May 10th, that's when India and Pakistan struck a ceasefire. It's been 194 days since that agreement, and in this time, Donald Trump has repeatedly claimed credit for it. At last count, more than 60 times. Imagine the obsession. On average, Trump has claimed credit for the ceasefire every 4 days. The latest instance was yesterday. President Trump was addressing the US-Saudi Economic Forum. As usual, he could not stick to topic. Trump veered to peace deals and mediation, and once again he spoke about India and Pakistan. This time, he added a new detail. Listen to this.
Look, India, Pakistan, they were going to go at it, nuclear weapons. I said, that's okay, you can go at it, but I'm putting a 350% tariff on each country. No more trade with the United States. No, you can't do that. I said, I'm going to do it. Come back to me and I'll take it down, but I'm not going to have you guys shooting nuclear weapons at each other, killing millions of people, and having the nuclear dust floating over Los Angeles. I'm not going to do it. I'll tell you what, the Prime Minister of Pakistan called me. Thank you very much. He actually said, I saved millions, and he said it in front of Susie. He said, President Trump saved millions and millions of lives. He doesn't even know that, but he saved millions of lives, and he talks about it. And I got a call from Prime Minister Modi saying, we're done. I said, you're done with what? We're not going to go to war. I said, thank you very much. Let's make a deal.
I'll repeat that for you. Trump says he threatened 350% tariffs on India and Pakistan. Now, this is the first time he's making this claim, 350% tariffs. He's talked about trade before. He's talked about nukes. But this 350% tariff is a new detail, and it makes no sense whatsoever. Any tariff over 50% is considered a de facto embargo because at those rates, no one will buy. Anything beyond that is just symbolic. 100%, 200%, 300%, 350%, it's all the same. And Trump did not stop there. Apparently, he was scared of a nuclear fallout. He feared that there could be nuclear dust over Los Angeles. At this point, even Geography has filed a complaint. The US West Coast is 13,000 kilometers from India. But who cares about facts? Who cares about reality? We're all living in the multiverse of Donald Trump. Nonetheless, let's set the record straight. The US did not mediate between India and Pakistan. Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi did not have a phone call. It was J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, who called Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And in that call, no tariff issue was discussed. The Indian government has clarified this multiple times, yet Trump keeps repeating it. And these claims are not being made in a vacuum. They're coming amid crucial trade talks. India and the US are hoping to complete a two-part deal. The first part is to address the tariffs. The second part is to agree to a free trade deal. Right now, Indian goods face 50% tariffs. India wants to bring it down to below 20%. Then they want a larger free trade deal, a deal that will remove more barriers. And to that end, India has made concessions. New Delhi is trying to address one of Donald Trump's biggest complaints, the trade deficit. Trump keeps complaining about the trade deficit. It's over $45 billion. The US buys more from India than it sells to India. This difference, this deficit, is $45 billion. So bilateral trade is in India's favor, and India is trying to balance it. Look at the recent moves. Indian state firms will buy cooking gas from the United States, that too for the first time ever. Plus, India is buying more American weapons. Yesterday, Washington approved a new sale. Javelin missiles worth $45 million and Excalibur projectiles worth $47 million. Put together, it's a $92 million deal. The Javelins are missiles fired from the shoulder. They're used against tanks and fortified enemy positions. India is getting 25 launch units plus 100 Javelin rounds. Next is the Excalibur. It is named after the sword of King Arthur. India is getting 216 Excalibur rounds and some repair services. Fun fact, India already uses these projectiles. We fire them from our existing artillery guns. And you know what's their selling point? Accuracy. These rounds can hit within 2 meters of the target, so they can be lethal without collateral damage. This is what India is getting for $92 million. I know it does not sound like a lot, but look at the larger trajectory. In the year 2007, US-India defense trade was virtually nil. Today, in 2025, it stands at $20 billion, India-US defense trade. Compare that to India's defense trade with Russia. Russia made up 62% of India's arms imports in 2017. 62%. By 2023, they were down to 34%. What do these numbers tell you? That India is diversifying away from Russia and that the US is a crucial part of that diversification. It's an important shift. Until now, this was not an issue. Because you did not have a US president warming up to Pakistan or claiming credit for the India-Pak truce or insisting that he used tariffs to force India's hand. But now you do. With Donald Trump in the White House, this defense relationship becomes very complicated. And yet, India is trying to not get distracted by the rhetoric. India is looking at the long term, whether it's for defense or energy or trade. India sees a partner in the US. Having said that, every country has a red line. Every country loses patience at some point. Let's hope Donald Trump does not cross that. For the last week, the stock market has been behaving like a caffeinated teenager, jittery, emotional and prone to mood swings. One moment it's plunging, the next it's bouncing back. Today it looks cheerful. And the reason? A single earnings call. The third quarter earnings of chip maker Nvidia. It has jumped by 62%. That's Nvidia's revenue in the third quarter. It's at $57 billion, and this is thanks to the growing demand for AI chips. Sales have gone up in the last 3 months. They climbed by 66%, touching $51 billion. This is for the last 3 months. And the next 3 months also look good. The outlook is strong. In the fourth quarter, Nvidia expects sales to touch $65 billion. $65 billion. That's well above estimates. Earlier, the prediction was $61 billion, so Nvidia is actually beating expectations again. It has pre-orders worth $500 billion for 2025 and 2026. Long story short, the sales will remain strong for the foreseeable future. And this is making Wall Street very happy because they've had a tough week. AI stocks were under immense pressure. There were fears of an AI bubble, so stocks were in the red. Investors were worried about the hype. Too much money was being poured in with little promise of returns. Some major investors even sold their shares, like Masayoshi Son. He's the CEO of SoftBank. Last week, he sold his entire stake in Nvidia for $5.83 billion. Then there's Peter Thiel. He is a billionaire investor and the co-founder of PayPal. He too dumped $100 million in Nvidia shares. There's also Michael Berry, another American investor who inspired a famous movie. He too betted against Nvidia, and all of this made Wall Street jittery because Nvidia is the AI darling. Its rise has been stupendous, from $144 billion in 2020 to $5 trillion in 2025. Nvidia is central to the AI story. So when large investors dumped Nvidia, markets fell. But today's numbers have come like a plot twist. Nvidia did not just clear the bar, it leaped far above it. Markets heaved a sigh of relief, the stocks rebounded, the sentiment improved, fears of the AI bubble receded. But there's still a sense of unease, because Nvidia's success has now created a paradox. The better it performs, the more the market depends on it. And the more the market depends on it, the more fragile it becomes. Think of it like building a skyscraper on a single steel beam. It may be strong, stronger than anything else around, but if that beam wobbles, everything else shakes with it. Today, Nvidia is that beam, and the market knows it. Even Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang was forced to address the bubble.
Don't forget to think about what is happening above, underneath what everybody sees as AI today. There's a whole movement of computing, from general purpose computing to accelerated computing. And that, if you take that into consideration, you'll come to the conclusion that in fact, what is left over to fuel that revolutionary agentic AI is not only substantially less than you thought, and all of it justified.
So here we are staring at the double-edged sword that Nvidia has become. On one hand, it's the engine of modern AI. On the other, it is so dominant that it distorts the market around it. Its success props up the entire index. Its guidance can swing trillions in global wealth, and its slightest misstep could trigger panic. This is how a company becomes both brilliant and dangerous at the same time, and the world has seen this before. Lehman Brothers in 2008, the dot-com giants in 2000, the railway monopolies in the 19th century, and now Nvidia in 2025. So today's story is not those numbers, it's not the revival of the stocks. Today's story is how deeply one company influences all of them. When you think of the AI race, you typically do not think of West Asia. But it is emerging as a new player in the game. Tonight, we'll tell you how. Leading the pack are Saudi Arabia and the UAE. They're buying powerful Nvidia chips, specifically two companies, G42 in the UAE and Humane in Saudi Arabia. Both are developing their own AI models, and for that, they need cutting-edge chips. But you can't just buy such chips off the shelf. The US has restricted their sale. So for every deal, American chip makers need a government approval. And this week, that approval has come for West Asia. Washington is allowing the sale of advanced chips to West Asia. And this is more than a tech deal. This is a significant move in the global AI race. But what's in it for the US? Why does it want to sell chips to West Asia? You can think of multiple reasons. The first is infrastructure. Gulf powers offer scale. They can build AI infra faster than the Americans. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have the land and the capital, and most importantly, they have the energy. Data centers, as you know, need a lot of energy to power them. In the US, there are constraints on the use of power, but the Gulf kingdoms have no such issue. They're building massive data centers. They're setting up large clusters to install chips and dedicated AI zones, and they're doing it much faster than the United States. And to feed this expansion, they need chips. That's where the Americans come in. West Asia can create something like a sister ecosystem for the American tech industry. It can help accelerate the development of AI. That's the first reason why the US is keen to work with them. The second reason is market control. The US wants the Gulf to use American technology. It doesn't want to lose this market to companies like Huawei. It doesn't want to lose the race to Chinese tech. The UAE's G42 used to work with Huawei, but that's changing now. Under US pressure, they have cut ties with the Chinese tech giant. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's Humane has issued a public commitment. They will not use Huawei's tech. That's what they've said. And in return, they're getting Nvidia chips. The third reason for America's keen interest is the money. The Gulf, after all, is a big customer. Saudi Arabia alone wants to deploy 400,000 AI chips. And they want to do this by 2030. That's an opportunity worth billions of dollars. But it comes with risks. What the Americans are selling are not ordinary chips. They're among the most powerful chips in the world. The US guards them closely. It doesn't want them falling in the hands of rivals. And that is why their sale comes with strict clauses. G42 and Humane must abide by tough security rules set by the US. Here's how the US Commerce Department described it. These companies must meet, quote unquote, rigorous security and reporting requirements. That's what they've said, which means regular checks and scrutiny. And these conditions apply to American players as well, not just the West Asian ones. Take Microsoft, for instance. Recently, Microsoft signed up AI projects in the Gulf. Reports say they had to meet very strict conditions, including regular audits, infrastructure reviews, and guarantees that the tech stays secure. I guess this is the new model for AI chip sales. It's driven not just by business, but also by strategic considerations. Because, as they say, chips are the new oil. And West Asia is not just a buyer, it's becoming a battleground. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not just importers of chips, they're building ecosystems that will drive this technology. They're building data centers, cloud infrastructure, critical tech breakthroughs like AI models built for the Arabic language. They're creating all of it. They want to have a say in the global AI ecosystem. They have the resources and the ambitions to build at scale, and they have the geopolitical weight to choose sides. And the United States wants to make sure that it becomes the chosen supplier and partner. Speaking of investments, Indian markets are on a high. The Nifty 50 touched an all-time high today. This is the index that tracks India's top 50 companies. It has crossed the 26,200 mark. That's the highest it has ever been. Later in the day, the index cooled off a bit, but the overall sentiment seems positive. And it's being driven by three key factors. Number one, the earnings of India Inc. Indian companies have reported strong results. This is for the second quarter of this financial year, from July to September. India Inc. has reported growth in profits. And this good run is expected to continue. Experts say profits will grow in the months ahead by almost 16% in 2026. So that's the first positive, the growing earnings and profits. The second positive are the GST cuts. GST stands for Goods and Services Tax. It's the consumption tax in India. In September, India slashed this tax substantially. Taxes were cut on 99% of the goods, and investors have reacted positively to this announcement. This tax cut, this GST cut, has given businesses breathing room. It has also made a lot of products cheaper. Investors feel this will help the economy grow. Reason number three for the market surge are the foreign investors. After months of pulling money out, they're coming back. In October, overseas funds became net buyers of Indian stocks, meaning they bought more than they sold. They were net buyers. They pumped in $1.3 billion. And that's a significant reversal. It signals growing trust in India's market outlook. The question is, will the momentum continue? What does 2026 look like for Indian markets? Will this rally lead to a bull run? American bank Morgan Stanley believes it will. They expect India's Sensex to breach the 100,000 mark, 1 lakh. And by the end of 2026, they say the Sensex will hit 107,000. The Sensex tracks India's top 30 companies. Today, it's at 85,000. Morgan Stanley says it will cross 1 lakh in the months ahead. That's a bold call. So what's driving this projection? Again, the earnings of India Inc. Morgan Stanley is optimistic about their numbers. It believes profits will continue to grow. But beyond that, they're buying into India's long-term growth story. The bank believes that India has the potential to sustain this growth momentum. Again, there are three factors that feed into it. One is rising private investment. Two, better finances of banks. And three, a steady inflation rate. Together, they will keep India's growth stable. That is Morgan Stanley's assessment. They're also counting on what they call a structural reset. And this is very interesting. They say India's domestic investors are driving a shift. They're investing in larger numbers through mutual funds, through retirement funds, through direct investments. And this is reducing India's reliance on foreign investors. This is a structural shift. It makes Indian markets more stable, more predictable. Of course, there are still some risks. External pressure points that could impact domestic numbers, like a slowdown in the US, or rising oil prices, especially if prices cross $100 a barrel. Or geopolitical tensions. If tensions escalate, they will have a bearing on Indian markets. But like I said, most of these are external risks. Inside India, the fundamentals look strong. So is this the start of a new bull run? It could be. India's stock market is sending signals of strength. The earnings are up, investor confidence is back, so is foreign money. Only this time the story is a little different. This time, India is not just riding the global wave. India is building resilience from within, and that is showing in the stock markets too. Vladimir Lenin once said, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. Things in Ukraine are starting to resemble that. Russia's invasion is about to enter its 4th year. It's been a slow, painful march, but this week things are moving at 2x speed. New reports talk of a new peace deal to end the war. A deal drafted in secret by the US and Russia. A deal that could end the war this week. I know it sounds absurd. We're talking about a deal that affects Ukraine, yet it was drafted by Russia and the US. From the looks of it, Kiev was not even at the table. So will it accept the secret deal? Also, what is this deal? Well, here's what we know. The deal was drafted through a secret back channel. From the US side, Steve Witkoff led the talks. Steve Witkoff is Trump's special envoy, sort of like his man Friday of diplomacy. From the Russian side, it was Kirill Dmitriev. He led the talks. He heads the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund. He's also a close aide of Vladimir Putin. These two men held secret talks. They bypassed the traditional channels of diplomacy, and they came up with a 28-point draft. Here's what it says. We look at the main points that it makes. 1. Ukraine will have to give up all of Donbass. Donbass is a region in eastern Ukraine. It is where most of the fighting is happening. Russia controls around 90% of Donbass, but this deal says Ukraine will surrender all of it, including the remaining 10%. Ukraine will give it to Russia. That's point number 1, giving up Donbass. Second, Ukraine will have to cut its military by half. Third, Ukraine will have to give up long-range weapons. Fourth, no more US aid or Western troops in Ukraine. Fifth, the Russian language will get official status in Ukraine. And sixth, there will be some security guarantees. We don't know the details yet. These are the 6 key points. There are 28 in all. And they make one thing quite clear. Russia wants to defang Ukraine, its territory, its army, its society, neutralize all of it, reduce Ukraine to a broken state, a state that cannot threaten Russia, a state that NATO or the European Union would never recruit. So simply put, this deal, the secret deal, favors Russia. Which brings us back to the question we started with. Will Ukraine's President Zelensky accept it? Well, he's stuck in a very difficult place. On the one hand, he has strong allies in Europe, and they want Ukraine to be part of the peace process.
What we as Europeans have always supported is a long-lasting and just peace, and we welcome any efforts to achieve that. Of course, for any plan to work, it needs Ukrainians and Europeans on board. So this is very clear.
On the other hand, Zelensky must face the ground realities. He is not winning this on the battlefield. Russia is stepping up the attacks. Yesterday was, in fact, the deadliest night of this year. Moscow fired 470 drones and 48 missiles at Ukraine. A lot of them were shot down, but the rest slammed into a residential building in Ternopil. That's a city in western Ukraine. It's far away from the front line. Just look at the aftermath. 26 people were killed in this attack. Many are yet to be found in the debris. It was one of the deadliest nights since the war began. And the idea is clear: to demoralize the Ukrainian people, to put more pressure on Zelensky. Yesterday's strike also targeted energy sites. As of now, 400,000 Ukrainians are without power, 4 lakh Ukrainians. Imagine that. It's around 2 degrees in Kiev right now. The winter will only get colder from here, and thousands of people are without power. Like I said, it's all about demoralizing the opposition. It is in this background that Zelensky must take a decision. He's just completed a trip to European capitals. He will return to Kiev later today, and when he does, US military officials will be waiting for him. Reports say they will present this plan to Zelensky. After that, the ball is in his court. Does he capitulate but save lives, or does he defy and prolong the war? It's clear that US President Donald Trump wants Zelensky to give in. But his allies in Europe are steadfast, and Putin knows this too. In recent days, the Russian president has ramped up the pressure on Europe. Right now, a Russian spy ship is sailing near British waters. London says it fired lasers at British pilots. Last week, Poland was hit by sabotage. They say Russia ordered blasts on their railway lines. Romania and Moldova have reported Russian drone incursions. Plus, mysterious drones have been spotted over multiple European airports. The assumption is Russia is waging a hybrid war. Basically, Putin is asking Europe to stay in its lane, to not ramp up its support for Kiev. In public, this has not deterred Europe. Their leaders still continue to offer full support to Ukraine. But in private, it's not clear what their position is. Trump alone may not be able to force Zelensky into a deal, but if Europe joins in, the war could finally end. This year has revealed something striking. Young people are shaping political conversations across continents. They've marched in Morocco, they have challenged power in Madagascar, they have protested in Peru and Indonesia, different locations, different governments, but the themes are the same: corruption, inequality, rising costs, and a generation demanding answers and accountability. Just a couple of months back, Nepal saw that global wave too. This week, it has returned. A small town in Nepal has seen fresh clashes. A local confrontation has escalated into tear gas, injuries, and a curfew. And it has pulled Gen Z back into Nepal's political spotlight. Here's a report.
Around the world this year, youth-led protests have reshaped the political discourse in many countries. From Kathmandu to Lima, from Rabat to Anantananarivo, Gen Z has taken the lead. They have demanded accountability, they have demanded change. And today that pressure is being felt again in Nepal. The tension began on Wednesday in Samara. It is in Nepal's Bara district. Gen Z activists gathered near a local airport to oppose a planned rally by former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli's party. Scuffles followed and stones were reportedly thrown. 2 local leaders were later arrested after complaints were filed against them. Today the young protesters returned. They said police had failed to detain those named in their earlier complaints. Crowds gathered and police reportedly used tear gas. Shots were also allegedly fired into the air. Reports say 10 people were injured, including 6 police personnel and 4 protesters. A small police post was reportedly set on fire. It was after this escalation that authorities imposed a curfew in the Bara district. They say the curfew is aimed at preventing further clashes. These fresh clashes come just months after a larger Gen Z uprising shook the Himalayan country. In early September, a brief government ban on social media triggered nationwide anger. It quickly expanded into a revolt against corruption and economic stagnation. Government buildings in Kathmandu were torched. At least 76 people were killed. Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned and the parliament was dissolved. Former Chief Justice Sushila Karki was appointed as the interim Prime Minister. On Wednesday, Karki appealed for calm. She has instructed security agencies to act with restraint ahead of elections set for March next year. But Nepal is part of a much wider trend. This year, young people have driven major protest waves around the world. In Morocco, a movement known as Gen Z 212 mobilized thousands of students and unemployed graduates in September. They were demanding reforms in healthcare, education, and social justice. In Indonesia, the Gen Z protested over rising living costs and social disparity in August. In Madagascar, Gen Zs led protests over water shortages and rolling blackouts. The military eventually took control in the African island country. In Peru, youth demonstrations began in September after a pension reform. They soon widened into protests against corruption, rising crime, and repression. And most recently, the Gen Zs have also taken to the streets of Mexico. Thousands there are protesting against rising violence. So across these countries, one theme is unmistakable. Young people are organizing through digital platforms, and they are demanding accountability from the people who govern them.
Donald Trump likes to end wars, or so he says. Since he returned to the White House this year, he claims to have ended 8 wars. He repeats those claims endlessly, facts notwithstanding. His list includes the Gaza war, the India-Pakistan conflict, the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, the 12-day Iran-Israel war, the Egypt-Ethiopia tensions, the DR Congo-Rwanda conflict, the Thailand-Cambodia border spat, and the Serbia-Kosovo conflict. He's also been trying to end the Ukraine war. It's a noble pursuit, literally. Not so much for peace, but for the Nobel Peace Prize, which he did not get this year. Either way, if he can reduce tensions, maybe the world should indulge him once in a while. But why are we talking about this tonight? Because Trump has set his eyes on a new conflict, the Sudan. It's a war that the world has largely forgotten, a war that has killed tens of thousands of people, displaced millions, and become one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Donald Trump wants to end it now. Do you know why? Because Saudi Arabia requested him to. Listen to this.
And I'll tell you, His Majesty would like me to do something very powerful having to do with Sudan. It was not on my my charts to be involved in that. I thought it was just something that was crazy and out of control. But I just see how important that is to you and to a lot of your friends in the room. Sudan, and we're going to start working in Sudan.
So Sudan was not on Trump's charts, as he says, but now that the Saudis have asked, it is. Trump also posted about it on his social media platform. He said the Sudan is facing tremendous atrocities. Food and doctors are desperately needed there, and Arab leaders want him to act. So what is this war that he's talking about? First things first, the Sudan is a country in Northeast Africa. It sits along the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia is directly across that water. Since its independence in 1956, the Sudan has struggled with coups and military rule. It saw 2 long civil wars between the north and the south, and then years of violence in the Darfur region. At that time, the man in power was Omar al-Bashir. He was the Sudan's longest ruling leader. In 2019, he was removed from power. A transitional council was formed, but that transition remained fragile. There was a power-sharing deal. In April 2023, that power-sharing deal collapsed. The 2 men who were supposed to govern together turned against each other. The first man leads the Sudanese army. The second leads a paramilitary force called the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. So the army and the RSF have been at war to control the country. The fighting has spread across the Sudan and divided it. And the human cost has been devastating. The country is grappling with a famine. The world has largely forgotten about it, but not Saudi Arabia. Which brings us to the question, why does Saudi Arabia care about the Sudan? For multiple reasons. Number one, geography. Like we just told you, Sudan is just across the Red Sea. If it collapses, it will affect shipping routes. It could push thousands of refugees towards Saudi shores, and it could create space for extremist groups. That's the first reason. Reason number 2, economy. Saudi Arabia is investing in investing heavily in this region. It wants food security and safety for its trade routes and its Red Sea projects. Reason number 3, regional rivalry. You see, this war has quietly pulled in Gulf competition. The UAE is accused of supporting the RSF, the paramilitary. They deny it, of course. On the other hand, you have Egypt and Saudi Arabia. They're believed to be closer to the Sudanese army. Now, Riyadh does not want the Sudan to slip into anyone's orbit, which is why they want a bigger power, like the United States, to step in and steady the balance. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman believes that Donald Trump can bring that balance, that he can end the deadlock in Sudan like he did in Gaza.
But the momentous breakthrough.
Of course, Trump likes this role. He calls himself the president of peace. But the real question is, how quickly can he turn his promises into peace? Our next story is from Nigeria. It is a country in West Africa. This week, it reported 2 back-to-back attacks. The first one came on Monday. 25 schoolgirls were abducted. They were taken from their school. The second attack came on Tuesday. A church was targeted. Gunmen opened fire during a prayer service. The pastor and worshippers were kidnapped, and 2 people were left dead. But these attacks are not isolated. They're part of a much bigger security crisis. Nigeria has recorded hundreds of kidnappings and killings this year. The violence has spread across multiple states. Nigeria has responded with heightened security deployments. But the surging violence has put it under growing international scrutiny. Here's a report.
It began as a normal church gathering. People were praying. People were singing. A quiet Tuesday evening service in a small town in Kwara State. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. And then the gunfire began. Loud, sudden, relentless. For a moment, no one moved. A moment of shock and disbelief. Then the panic began. People pushed towards the vestry. They ducked behind benches. They grabbed whoever they could. Everything else was left behind. And through that chaos, the gunmen entered. By the time police reached the town, the damage was clear. 2 people were dead, and several more, including the pastor, kidnapped. The entire attack lasted only minutes. But the shock has traveled far beyond that small church in the Kwara State. Because another tragedy had already shaken the country. Just a day ago, 25 schoolgirls were abducted in Kebbi State. Armed men had climbed the school fence in the middle of the night. The vice principal had been shot in his home. The girls had been kidnapped and taken into the forest. 1 girl escaped, but the rest are still missing. These 2 attacks add to a larger pattern. Nigeria is facing a surge in kidnappings. Reports suggest 857 people have been abducted in the first half of this year. Children have been taken from schools. Worshippers have been seized from places of prayer. And families across several states live with the fear of more violence. To give context, Nigeria is the scene of numerous conflicts. Different regions in the country are facing different threats. In the northeast, the threat comes from jihadist insurgents. In the northwest, heavily armed criminal gangs move through forested routes. In the central belt, clashes erupt between herdsmen and farming communities. Different conflicts, different motives, but the same outcome each time. Lives lost, families displaced, and a security system under immense strain. This rise in violence has also drawn attention abroad. In the United States, the debate has intensified. President Donald Trump accused radical Islamists of killing Christians in very large numbers. He warned of possible military action. The Nigerian government rejected that claim. Officials said the violence affects both Christians and Muslims. But the criticism has continued. At the United Nations, U.S. Ambassador Mike Waltz said churches were under attack. He said clergy were being assassinated. Artist Nicki Minaj has also added her voice. The Nigerian government has responded. President Bola Tinubu has postponed his foreign trips. He has also held emergency meetings, and he has placed the security agencies on their highest alert. But the attacks have raised the question, can Nigeria bring this wave of violence under control before it grows even worse?
Do you know what FOMO means? Of course you do. At this point, everyone probably knows what FOMO means. It's basically become part of the global dictionary right next to selfie and lol. FOMO stands for fear of missing out, F-O-M-O. We've lived with it for a decade now, but here's the thing. FOMO is yesterday's news because there's a new 4-letter acronym taking over the internet. And if you don't know it yet, well, you're about to experience FOMO because I'm talking about FOFO, F-O-F-O, the fear of finding out. What does it mean? Well, FOFO may sound like a new fun Gen Z term, but it isn't really. Doctors have been seeing this for ages. They didn't call it FOFO, of course, but the behavior has been there. Say you feel unwell, but you refuse to see the doctor, or maybe delay annual checkups like a mammogram or a pap smear. Or say you find a mole, but you're scared that it may end up being something bigger, so you avoid the doctor altogether. That is FOFO, the fear of finding out. And while none of this is medically recommended, it is emotionally very on brand for us humans. And it's not just people with specific anxieties or health fears. FOFO is universal. It does not discriminate. And it has moved beyond medical tests and advice. It's about everything now. You don't check your bank balance, fearing it may be too low. You ignore the engine light on your car. You avoid looking at the flickering light. You see a missed call, but don't call back, fearing a difficult conversation. Why? Well, it is FOFO. You don't want to find out what's on the other side. But here's the twist. FOFO rarely comes alone. It brings the whole dysfunctional acronym family along, like FOBO, the fear of better options. You're stuck comparing, scrolling, researching, waiting for the perfect choice. You're basically living with indecision. Or FOPO, fear of other people's opinions. You stay in jobs you have outgrown or relationships you don't love, not because you want to, but because you're scared of judgment. There's FOMO, fear of messing up. It's where perfectionism turns into self-sabotage. You over-prepare, you overthink, you overanalyze for every single thing. Also on the list is FODA, fear of doing anything. The world feels overwhelming. The solution is to do nothing. Then you have FOSO, fear of starting over. You hate your job, you're burnt out, you've outgrown everything around you, but the idea of starting from scratch feels like climbing Everest in bathroom slippers. And the final one, FOBA, fear of being alone. You cannot stand the thought of being alone. It's the kind of fear that keeps people from walking away, even when they know that they should. But somewhere in this alphabet soup of anxieties, FOFO sits quietly running the show. Because if you're scared of choosing, or scared of judgment, or scared of failing, or scared of starting, or scared of doing, or scared of being alone, or scared of leveling up, at the core is usually one thing. You're scared of what you will find out. Scared that the truth will force you to grow, change, or confront something. And that is the fear of finding out. And here's the inconvenient truth. You can feel FOFO, but you can't live by it, because information, however scary, is power. Not knowing may give you the vibes, but knowing will always give you the choices. Do you remember the time when chocolate meant your dairy milk bars? Or if it was fancy, it was a Ferrero Rocher. Well, not anymore. India is going through an artisanal chocolate boom. Yes, real artisanal chocolate. Cacao is now grown in southern India. Beans are ethically sourced from farms, they say. Bars are infused with Indian flavors like turmeric and jamun. India's artisanal chocolate industry is worth $220 million right now, and it's only rising every year. So what has triggered this boom, and where is India's chocolate story headed next? Here's our report.
If you grew up in India in the 90s or early 2000s, Your idea of luxury chocolate was probably whatever your relatives pulled out of a duty-free bag. A Toblerone here, a Lindt there. Objects of myth, wrapped in gold and eaten only on Sundays or after exam results. Everything else, the chocolates tasted largely the same. Sweet, milky, and reassuringly familiar. Chocolate was chocolate. It wasn't supposed to have tasting notes or a backstory. But fast forward to today, and suddenly India has opinions on chocolates, and very strong ones, on cacao percentages, on single estate beans, on whether a bar with turmeric crystals counts as innovation or blasphemy. The change didn't come overnight. It crept in slowly. As urban incomes rose and e-commerce turned everyone's doorstep into a gourmet store, something interesting began to happen. Indians stopped treating chocolate as a convenience good and started treating it like wine. Suddenly, we weren't just eating chocolate. We were evaluating it. Does it snap cleanly? Does it smell fruity? Is the cacao ethically sourced? Is the packaging recyclable? Chocolate, once a guilty pleasure, became a lifestyle decision. Wellness trends didn't hurt either, like countless Instagram reels saying dark chocolate is good for the heart. For India's artisanal chocolate story, it wasn't a global giant or a multinational campaign. It was a handful of small, stubborn, cacao-obsessed people. They decided the country deserved better chocolate, and that India could grow it too. Down south, in the humid folds of Kerala and Tamil Nadu, growers started treating cacao as a primary crop. Chocolatiers started traveling to these farms. They even selected single-origin beans and creating bars that tasted of place. And that's how India had entered the bean-to-bar era. But it wasn't just plain old chocolate. It was also experimental. It was chocolate, yes, but unmistakably Indian. All of this means India's artisanal chocolate market is experiencing a significant boom. The market was valued at around $220 million in 2024. It is set to grow by 12% every year, so it is projected to reach about $620 million by 2033. This is being driven by rising disposable incomes, increasing health awareness, and growing demand for premium, organic, and ethically sourced chocolates. So where does it go next? If you think India's chocolate journey ends with turmeric dark chocolate or vegan cacao nib bars, think bigger. What's unfolding now feels less like a trend and more like Act 1 of a much larger story. Here's where things could go. First, Indian cacao goes global. We've already started seeing international recognition. Second, more crossovers with Ayurveda and regional foods. Imagine bars infused with ashwagandha, jamun, or smoked Himalayan salt. Third, chocolatiers collaborating with chefs and farmers. Menus built around cacao pairings. Tasting rooms, or even chocolate tourism. India loves reinventing things it adopts. Chocolate is simply the latest canvas.
Can you imagine going 64 days without sunlight? That's real life for people in Alaska's northernmost town, Barrow. Yesterday was Barrow's last sunset. The next sunrise will be 64 days later on the 22nd of January 2026. There's some interesting science behind this phenomenon. The Earth has a 23.5 degree tilt. So during winters, the sun will not rise in the Arctic Circle. It will remain below the horizon. Fascinating, isn't it? But as always, the internet does not care about the science. All they care about is the pop culture impact. 64 days without sunlight equals the long night from Game of Thrones. Take a look. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Donald Trump's son poses for photos at India's Taj Mahal. Madagascar announces the discovery of a giant emerald rock weighing 300 kilograms. And ash towers over the East Java National Park after a volcano erupts in Indonesia. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1945, the Nuremberg trials began in Germany. 24 high-ranking Nazis went on trial for war crimes during the Second World War. It was the first trial of its kind in history, conducted by an international tribunal. 12 of them were later sentenced to death. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
I was a revolutionary. I became a ruler. I claimed to protect my people. I terrorized them instead. I built palaces. I started wars. I lost everything. Some called me a defender of Arab pride. History remembers me as a dictator. Who am I?